We've had so much fun this season. We've had some incredible guests talk to us about best practices for organizational change, the power of language, importance and impact of psychological safety, and of course, self-care and wellness at work. We've also tackled everything from navigating conflict to crafting personal vision statements and overcoming imposter syndrome. In this episode, the Season 2 finale, we're going to focus on the best of the rest. Yep, we're going to wrap up the season by highlighting the most compelling and impactful leadership communication ideas and practices that we've discussed this season. Thanks for joining us on The Communicative Leader. Hello and welcome to The Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah O'Million-Hodges. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On The Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. Hi, my friends. I'm so excited to chat with you today. My leaders, we have done a lot this season. Considering the sheer breadth of topics we've covered, it has been a fun challenge to consider how to integrate these ideas in a meaningful way for you. I like you all way too much to just leave you with this laundry list of here's what I liked in episode 1, or remember this from episode 2, and huzzah, episode 3, and so on and so forth. So this one, it took some time. It took some thought. What did I end up with? What are we going to do today? We're going to look at highlights in 3 sections and end, as we always do, with some communication-based tips and practices. So what are these sections? 1, employees need to feel safe and heard. 2, the way we talk to ourselves and others matters. And 3, we lead with or without a formal title. So now we have our roadmap. We can dive into our first section. Employees need to feel safe and need to feel heard. There is no easier way to put it than relationships flourish or flounder as a result of our communication interactions. One thing we should always strive to promote in our workplaces is psychological safety. What is psychological safety? The courage to speak up and the confidence to know that you'll be heard. It also means working in an environment where we can dissent, we can raise counterpoints, we can own our mistakes. Earlier this season, we welcomed Stefan Wedner, a psychological safety expert, and he left us with some really helpful advice for developing high-performance leaders, teams, and organizations. A couple of the things that really stuck with me from Stefan's visit. First, psychological safety, it's not necessarily a constant, my friends. That means that maybe some things, we have personnel changes, and it could impact how we feel at work. Or maybe we're navigating some trying times in our personal life, and it's undermining our confidence and our abilities. Here comes the importance of really strong leader, member, and peer relationships. When leaders know their employees really well, they're attuned to when something's off. They notice a change in behavior. Maybe this employee, maybe they're not offering as many ideas, or maybe they're withdrawing from team events. Or maybe the caliber of their work has changed a bit. These are all cues. Check in, see how they are, see what support you can offer. This also helps to underscore the importance of the strong peer relationships. My titled leaders out there, remember, create spaces and time for your team members to connect. It is essential. While on the surface, you might look and think, idle chatter, they have so much to do, we have so much to do. But it builds trust, it builds connection, and it often leads to more innovation and more creativity. Part of the reason peers are as influential as they are is because they help us meet so many of our needs, and they fulfill so many roles. We are hardwired to connect with others, to develop relationships, to meet these interpersonal needs. So why do we develop these relationships, and why are they essential at work as well? They can give us a sense of safety, or trust at work, right? If we're thinking about psychological safety. They can fill a missing role of a friend at work. They can just be there a sanity check. Like, hey, did you get this? Is this the same interpretation or am I losing my mind, right? We might have similar work values, or we might have a lot of similar hobbies and interests outside of work. And certainly there's proximity, right? Just being near someone, spending time collaborating with them, problem solving with them. All of that can lead to liking. What else? They can validate us. They can affirm us. We might have access to more information and social capital, right? We have more connections. We might have more access. We might have more popularity. Yes, folks, we are talking about popularity and generating liking. At the end of the day, we can boil this down to social support. The solid, trusting relationships in place, we can give and receive emotional, informational, and instrumental support. So again, that was a little detour considering some of the ways in which we build an environment that works to establish psychological safety. And this leads us to another way in which we can communicate and connect with others to help our team members feel safe, to share, and to speak up. Heather Hansen, a global strategic communication expert, she wants us to listen in a way that encourages others to speak. Really profound, right? What else is key here? Research continues to show that those who are the best listeners are often those readily identified as leaders, right? So makes sense. The best leaders are those who can be trusted, those who actually make sense of what others are telling them with their words and with their behaviors. So what are some of the things that we can do? Especially if we're working in a multinational corporation and we're interacting with those whose first language is not English. Heather has so many incredible tips, and I encourage you to check out her books and her materials. But I'm going to distill this wisdom into 4 takeaways. 1, withhold judgment, right? We're not listening to get someone to point out a grammatical error. We are listening for the heart of the idea. She encourages us too to be present, right? You're not thinking about what you're going to eat for lunch. You're not thinking about that list of emails that you have to respond to. You are there with the conversational partner. There's 3, put yourself in their shoes. Think about how challenging it would be for you to express high-level strategic ideas in a secondary language or a tertiary language, right? Put yourself in those shoes, and there we will have a lot more grace, I promise you. And 4th, stay curious. When we're curious, we tend to suspend judgment, even if it's momentarily. And kind of dive in and say, why am I feeling this? What am I feeling? Right? Explore those feelings from that position of curiosity. Final way, we're going to return to the idea of seeing and hearing employees. I want us to return to advice and research our first guest of season 2 left us with, Vanessa Hills. She told us engage employees in dialogue, and we're more likely to succeed in achieving change. I want to make this a little bit clearer for us. What organizations have done traditionally? A diagnostic approach to change. So they diagnose what is wrong, and then they tell employees what they're going to do. So it might sound a little bit like employees do X, Y, and Z by Monday, right? Period. Hard stop. But now, as Vanessa told us, we're changing things around a little bit. We're engaging employees. What happens when we ask them? What happens when we dialogue? Let's think about how that might sound a little different. Employees, we need your expertise. How do we go from A to B? We are listening. So not only is dialogic approach employee-centered, but Vanessa tells us about a study where approach came with a 93% success rate. This is insane, folks. 93%. This is compared with the industry average of about 30% with that traditional diagnostic route. So much good comes from listening to employees, from engaging them, from letting them know that you see them and that they matter. The work they do matters. We can cultivate a workplace we want to be a part of, one where we feel a sense of safety and security, where we know what we do matters, and we bring our own unique and ideas, our expertise, in a way that is inherently valuable. So, this season we hit on the first idea. Employees need to feel safe and heard quite a bit. Another major theme of season 2, the way we talk to ourselves and the way we talk to others, it matters. Leaders are individuals who value communication and who learn to do it well. My friends, leaders are not heroes. They are thoughtful, adept communicators. If you don't already, please start to equate your communication ability with your leadership ability. My friends, communication is the yardstick others are using to assess your leadership ability. All of you out there, all ranks, all industries, think about relationship management and credibility. These are two easy ways for us to hone in on our communication abilities and to think about the impact that we may be having on others in our work group spaces. Even if we're not in a titled leadership role, and even if we're not interested in one, relationships, they form the foundation of our lives. Whether with our romantic partner, our kids, our extended families, our neighbors, our peers, taking a step back to view these associations through a communicative lens helps to strengthen these relationships. To focus our attention on communicating in an intentional and audience-centered way, we're going to notice huge changes in those associations. What else? When our relationships are in good places, solid places, it frees us up for everything else in our lives, to create, to have fun, to focus. But when those relationships, when they feel unstable or crumbling or feel really trying, boy, it's hard to stay present. Another one to consider, credibility. Try to be mindful of avoiding powerless language. Own your qualifications. Own those accomplishments. You did it. Also, make the time to prepare. Small things that go a long, long way in developing and maintaining relationships and gaining the trust of your audiences and in demonstrating goodwill. Another way we can see this is just in the way we chat about everyday organizational occurrences. My friends out there, those of you in my formal leadership positions, those who advise, supervise others, it can be frustrating when an employee, an intern, or even one of your kids continues to make a mistake over and over, or they forget a process or overlook something that you've addressed so many times. Well, it is human to snap back with, you just don't understand, or you just don't get it, or how many times are we going to have to do it? It might be a shocker, but that's not going to go over well, right? What's an employee-centered way to address the situation, or an audience-centered way if you are not a titled leader? Instead of something like you just aren't getting it, try how can I best support you, right? How can I best support you? There is more than a good chance your employee or your kiddo or your intern knows that they aren't meeting the expectations. So instead of responding with this reactive response, it is so much better to have a frank conversation to see what additional resources they need in order to be successful. Now, how do we know that we are communicating instead of accidentally falling into that reactive talking back trap? Check in with yourself. Make sure you're actually engaged in dialogue, not dialogue in name only, or DINO for short. Many leaders and organizations are guilty of DINO. So what can we do to make sure you're actually connecting, actually communicating, and actually engaging? Vanessa Hills left us with some key tips. She told us ask questions, and don't be afraid to answer questions either. This is key. Ask people what is best. Ask them what we're doing that works. Ask them what could be done better. What would make this process more seamless? Ask them what training would help them to develop. Ask them further feedback. I also don't want you to shy away from responding to questions either. This means being transparent. And if you can't share information yet, give your employees an idea of when they can expect it. The other tip Vanessa left us with, take a moment to assess if everyone is being included. Think about that idea of no hogs and no logs. We create an inclusive environment by making sure no one in the group is dominating the conversation. We can also make sure that others aren't just sitting back and withholding their expertise. This means rising as a facilitator in the conversation. Help to rephrase things, ask questions, call on colleagues for their specific ideas. We don't want people to feel singled out. We don't want people to feel unprepared. So maybe sending that agenda ahead of time. Let them know what you expect. Maybe it's, hey, we're going to go around and like everyone to bring at least one idea for this new initiative. Or use a teaching hack, the pair and share. Depending on the team size, consider putting colleagues together as a way to enhance comfort for your introverts and to engage everyone's ideas. You can also provide specific time limits. I want to hear all ideas, but to accommodate everyone who has a contribution, we're going to keep it to 3-minute limit. If you have more, I want to hear it. Please follow up in email. And the final suggestion that Vanessa left us with to avoid DINO, or again, dialogue in name only, don't only ask for questions and feedback, create spaces for people to share their ideas. It is one thing to say, yeah, I love feedback, or of course my door is always open. The thing is, if the door isn't always open and you aren't able to respond to emails efficiently or really at all, then this is DINO, dialogue in name only. If you're not great at emails, let people know. Hey, I'm really good at reading these, but not at responding immediately. Maybe you consider setting up an anonymous survey where people can leave feedback. You could set up weekly office hours, so long as they are maintained and truly open. You can help to make it a work group norm by adding it to team and individual meetings as well. And when we think about talking to others with respect, when we think about talking to ourselves with respect, we would be remiss if we didn't include the wisdom from licensed professional counselor Christine Sugg. Christine emphasized the importance of positive self-talk. This is far from what you do now, and again, who doesn't fall into this bucket once in a while? Consider talking to yourself the way you would talk to your best friend, a family member, a child. Turn that kindness and that grace inward. Another way in which she helped us to consider the importance of words is via the STOP method. In addition to helping us be more mindful at work, we can do the STOP method in 30 seconds or less. So STOP is an acronym. So the S, stop what you're doing in that moment, hit pause, even if it's only 30 seconds. T, take deep belly breaths. By breathing deeply, you're moving the serotonin in your body. O, observe. What am I feeling? Where do I feel it? How am I talking to myself? How can I improve the way in which I'm talking to myself? And P, proceed mindfully. What do I want of this moment? What am I working toward? How do I move closer to my goals? Your mental health and well-being impact your overall health and well-being. Well-being should not be shelved at work. It is not something that matters only at home or only on the weekends. Your work environment ideally should add to your well-being, and knowing that if there's stress or issues that come up, you should be able to talk about it. How do we do that? This one, my titled leaders, I want you to normalize this with your talk and your actions. Acknowledge when it's been a stressful time. Show team members that you need to take deep breaths. Talk to them about what resources are available. And if you use some of these resources yourself, share that with your team if you're comfortable. And now, my friends, on to our final section, leading with or without a title. You are positioned to lead if you have a title, if you're a director, if you're a supervisor, if you're a manager, or if you don't have a title. Your communication decisions and actions are what allow you to emerge as a leader, to develop those trusting relationships, and to navigate conflict and other tricky situations in a respectful, pro-social, and dignified manner. I think it's important to think about leadership communication not only from the perspective of formal managers, but as an employee in any role. Because truly, in all positions, there are so many opportunities to lead. So I hope to speak to everyone here because informal leadership is so important. One thing we talked about this season that is so important to revisit and falls under this category of leading with or without a title are team roles. When we think of team roles, we usually think of our job title. That is, a lot of times we think of the role we were hired to fulfill. That is essential, of course. But what else is important? All of the informal roles we ebb and flow throughout during our workday. Some of these role categories we looked at, they are task roles or relational roles, and both of those tend to skew to the positive, the productive, the pro-social. These are good for teams. But we also need to consider those that are negative or at the very least can detract from team functioning. Some are even harmful to members. Those are our self-centered communication roles and our harmful team roles. Let's start with our task roles. So we have leader, expediter, information seeker, gatekeeper, and recorder. These roles, a lot of times we see these come up when we are in meetings, when we are in important discussions, when we are in ideation sessions. So certainly you can be a formal leader, but you can be a project leader. You can be someone that stands up to be a strong facilitator and lead that meeting, right? If we think about some of these other task roles, the expediter, someone who helps us to stay on task, right? So you might say, okay, what I'm hearing is A, B, and C. Is this right? Is this the right interpretation? Okay, great. Then let's move on to consider the next steps. Information seeker, someone who's just asking questions, right? So these task-related roles, again, these tend to be very positive and they tend to help us to work together successfully, collaboratively in order to meet deadlines, in order to achieve goals. And again, I know we're going through these quickly, but this is just a high-level overview, so please dive into this particular podcast on group roles if you're interested in learning more, because we go through each of these in great detail. Now on to our relational roles. Supporter, tension releaser, harmonizer, and interpreter. These roles are awesome for cohesion and connection and navigating conflict within groups and teams, right? These are folks who go in and validate others, who can use humor appropriately and in a way that is inclusive in order to help release any tension. We have someone who can help others to connect, that harmonizer, who can kind of cut through, again, that tension, the misunderstanding, to reorient the group on the shared goal. So again, those task and relation roles, like we said, those are productive. These are positive. Now we're going to move into two categories that we tend to see as a bit more negative. Self-centered communication roles. central negative, monopolizer, confessor, and insecure compliment seeker. Okay, so you might be thinking, this doesn't sound so bad. What we often see here are folks who aren't quite as adept in their communication abilities. We also have some folks who are on the side of being more insecure. Maybe they're new to the team, to the organization, to the industry. So a lot of these self-centered communication roles, as the name implies, are really drawing attention to themselves. And this can be at the expense of the team. It can be at the expense of a deadline, at the expense of a project. Final set, and again, obviously negative category, harmful team roles. The blocker, withdrawer, aggressor, and doormat, right? These are not easy ones to deal with. These are ones that formal title leaders, I strongly encourage you to document these roles. There might be instances where it is best to involve human resources and formal plans of improvement. So again, why is this important? Those task and relational roles engage us in thoughtful communication strategies, in communication that is going to help our team function at its best. What we have to remember, though, is these negative roles. This is when communication, when we're not necessarily being audience-centered, when we're not necessarily being inclusive, when we're not necessarily being intentional. These are things that are going to detract. Thing to consider is all teams have one or more members who tend to lean into those self-centered communication or harmful team roles. In the episode, we talk about how to spot these roles and how to use our own communication and our formal and informal leadership to lean into the positive and steer away from the negative. And naturally, when we think about team roles, we mention the role of the leader. So again, it could be that titled role, that manager, director, supervisor, can be less formal. Maybe we're leading a committee or a project. It is essential, again, to remember no title is needed. At its root, leadership equals influence. How do we influence? Through our communication, our actions, and our words. So what does this mean? Even if you have zero interest in a formal managerial position, you're still in a position to lead from where you are. I really enjoyed the episode where we looked at informal leadership, referent power, and leadership emergence. So what does this mean for you? Condensed down to the simplest of forms, it means that you should walk the walk. Do the work that you are hired to do and do it well. Exemplify the skills and technical expertise that you bring to the table. That is not it. I want you to talk the good talk. It is one thing to know the role, but it is another to know people. Not only do I want you to really lean into your role, I want you to do it in a people-centered way. Interpersonal relationships first. By developing individual relationships with each colleague, listening to them, supporting them, respecting them, you are exemplifying leadership. You're doing it, my friend. And now that we've chatted about our 3 sections, when we bundled up our season 2, I want to leave us with a few of the most impactful communication strategies we've talked about this season. I'm going to have you focus on 2 tangible practices. And I get it. It is a lot. It takes a lot of bandwidth to navigate your workplace, complete your tasks, and work on new communication practices. But my friends, I know you trust me by now. I'm not going to lead you astray. These tips, these strategies, yes, they're going to help you at work, but they're going to help you to express yourself with greater confidence in all aspects of your life. And not just with greater confidence, but with more clarity and in an audience-centered way so your message connects in a respectful but impactful way. So what are these 2 communication strategies and tips we're going to look at? We're going to look at best practices for navigating conflict, and we're going to look at paths to empowerment. So whether you lean into conflict or tend to run from it, these communication-rooted tips help you when disagreements or misunderstandings pop up. So what should you do? 1, address conflict as soon as possible. The longer we let things marinate, the more likely we give the impression conflict is resolved when it's not, or more likely that one or both parties are going to feel disrespected and undervalued. We're going to chat face-to-face if possible. Why? Face-to-face communication allows for your nonverbals. Facial expressions and tone go a long way in conveying empathy and sincerity. So again, if we're working remotely, if we are virtual, then jumping on Zoom or another video conferencing software or using something like FaceTime or WhatsApp, that's going to mimic the face-to-face and again, allow us to account for those nonverbals. 3rd step, I want you to focus on the issue. What is the problem? What is the misunderstanding? What is the decision? And not the person. This can be challenging, especially if the root of conflict is with someone we tend to disagree with. But we have to remember, this isn't about them. It is about the decision or the discussion on the table. And the final evidence-based suggestion for navigating conflict, use I statements. This is one of our favorite go-to communication tips on the Communicative Leader. Why? It allows you to express your feelings without placing blame or guilt on someone else. And I feel or I believe. Not you made me do this. Nope. We're not going to do finger pointing. We are just going to speak from our perspective, again, using that I statement. Remember, unresolved conflict tends to grow legs and attach itself to other unrelated issues. Lean into conflict via these communication tips. I don't promise it's going to feel more comfortable, at least not right away anyway. But these tips will help you to effectively navigate these misunderstandings and increase your chances of keeping your relationships in a good place. What else? Doing hard things can help you to feel empowered. Empowerment is a feeling that feels really good. And not only that, the feeling comes with some pretty cool behaviors. My friends, when we feel empowered, we are engaged, we ask questions, we raise concerns, we're more likely to own our own mistakes. So what are some of these paths to empowerment? 1, I want you to think about helping others. You might think, what? How is helping others empowering me? When you're in a position to assist someone else, to teach them, to orient them, to support them, you help them while empowering yourself. And you're demonstrating those leadership skills. I also want you to set specific goals. There's a link between commitment and consistency. Post that goal in the bathroom mirror. Tell a friend. Share it on social media. Even achieving small goals like drinking more water can bolster your feelings of empowerment. This idea of I can do it. We're also enhancing that self-efficacy. Last, ask, listen, and reflect. Ask those who truly know you and really see you what they see as your strengths. Ask them what they admire about you. Ask them what makes you stand out. And then listen. Listen without interjecting. Listen without clarifying. Listen without a wandering mind. Then reflect. Have you noticed these strengths before? How can you cultivate these abilities even greater depth? Remember, my friends, leading well is hard because it's hard, not because you're doing it wrong. We never said leadership was easy. We said it was a communication-based skill that can always be improved, fine-tuned, and sharpened. A sincere thank you to all of my leading listeners out there. I've truly enjoyed working with you on Season 2, chatting with you and getting to know you. You, my listeners, you are so appreciated. I look forward to chatting about even more ways in which you can make your work life what you want it to be in Season 3, coming in late summer. Thank you again. All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on The Communicative Leader.